So I'm going to now get Jan Williams on. Jan is the co-founder or the founder of Object and
refounder.
yes, the refounder of Object, and which is a fantastic women's rights organization which covers a range of interconnected and important issues, and also is a sort of very, very creative and activist. You've been on the board, joined the board of Kenwood Ladies Pond, which is supposedly, and has been until about 3 years ago, a women-only bathing pond, a sort of natural bathing, outdoor bathing pond on Hampstead Heath in London. And Jan and others found out that they had decided that men who said that they were women were allowed to join and swim there. And so you joined the board and have been struggling and fighting against that. So what have you learned from your experiences at the pond, Jan?
First of all, I've learned that groupthink is the most powerful force in the world. If you can persuade people to believe in something and think they're right, they will do absolutely anything. I've never believed I would have been treated so appallingly by a group of very nice ladies. There's a very good book on it, actually, came out here recently. Groupthink. It's by a man. Hope that's all right. Very good book. So that groupthink is very powerful. I also learned that when an organization loses its purpose and adopts a new philosophy or a cause, then it starts to act only in its own interests. It confuses the cause and the organization. I think this is what happened to Amnesty, Stonewall, Humanists UK, Fawcett Society, and much smaller and less important, the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association. And this, loads of charities are losing their way because of this. I learned that power grabs are incredibly easy to hide. There was one at the pond. They just tried to change one little word in the Constitution. Instead of users of the pond, which included all the women who go there for picnics, to swimmers at the pond, which includes all the people who are lucky enough to have swimming lessons, who haven't got small children to look after. In other words, all the nice white middle class ladies who like to come in their cars. Just one little word. They thought nobody would notice, but we did when we stopped it.
So what was that? They were saying that swimmers of the pond were allowed to be in the association, but
They were
not
saying
users. Yeah.
That's right. They changed it to swimmers because all the people on the committee are committed swimmers. But the area that the pond is in is a very mixed population area. There's lots of Orthodox religious women, Muslims, Jewish women, who a lot of people who grew up in other countries where they probably don't teach the girls to swim. The regulations at the pond are that a child has to be over 8 before she can go in the water. So if you've got young children, you can't go off and leave your children on the bank and swim without them. If you've got several children and you've got even one under 8, you can't leave a small child on its own.
Yeah. No.
Loads of women don't know how to swim. It's not about swimming. Swimming is part of it. There's a lovely meadow there away from the male gaze where you can take your top off and no one will bat an eyelid. And it's a lovely area for picnics. I know women who use that week in, week out and have never been in the actual water. And it was about marginalising them.
And okay, so what? Just going back to the pond itself. What and where is the pond, and how did you hear about it? And then can you tell us what the association is as well? What's the difference?
Sure, yes. It's in a very, very prosperous area of London, Hampstead. It's a huge green space and it's got 3 bathing ponds in it. There's the women's pond, which is very small but nice, secluded, tiny. There's the men's pond, which is huge with a lovely diving board, about 10 times as much space as the women have. And there's a mixed pond where anyone can go, also very large. So the women have drawn the short straw, and now they haven't even got their own pond at all. I found out about it working with local single parents this is a great place. A lot of them, people who are single parents, some are happy single parents. Very often that the man has disappeared for some reason of his own, or there's been violence or something nasty's happened. Those women can end up being victims, and they're very, very much in need of a nice space away from the male gaze where they can go with their children, meet their friends and feel safe and relaxed. So I learned about it through them. And in those days, you didn't have to pay. It's now under the control of the City of London Corporation, and you do have to pay The Kenwood Ladies Pond Association is a user group for people that use the pond, or as they would prefer to see it, swim in the pond. And it's a very low-key little organisation. But since it adopted the trans men, the men are women philosophy, of course, men have crept in there. A lot of the conservative women, you know, from religious minorities won't go there. They're not allowed to go there. Some of them have protested and some of them have not. There is actually a Jewish woman on the committee at the moment who said that she would be quite happy to bring along one Jewish woman who said it didn't matter to her that the pond was mixed sex now, which is a betrayal of all the other, you know, religious women, isn't it? I thought that was pretty shabby.
Isn't it the City of London Corporation? They're the people who are sort of actually in charge,
Yes,
and they make the rules, but the
they only can
association,
operate it, and they introduce charges. And the
yeah.
Kenwood Ladies Pond Association, the user group, actually challenged that. They took a case to court. They lost, partly I think because they did it on behalf of disability rights. They've got several prominent disabled women on the committee. That's great. But the tendency is that they tend to think they're okay on protected characteristics because of that. Oh, we've got 2 disabled women on our committee. No one can touch us on protected characteristics. And that was my first encounter with this imbalance. You can't cherry pick protected characteristics. We have to be fair to all of them.
And what did you do about it then when you joined the committee? What
Well,
happened?
first of all, I was a very good committee member. I attended meetings. I took packets of biscuits. I stood at tables and sold lots of lovely merchandise. They run breakfasts and tea parties. And obviously you need to go and help with those, moving furniture, putting food out, clearing up afterwards. I can now say that I have washed up single-handedly by hand for a tea party of 80 people, and that's what the little ring over my head indicates. So I thought I would establish myself as a good committee member before I did anything else. And then I said to them at a meeting, I said, this is an issue I think we need to discuss. It's really important. I think the pond should be women only again. How should we go about this? So very straightforward, very down the line. They said, send an email. So I composed a lovely email giving the main reasons why I thought the pond should be single sex. I talked about the Equality Act. I talked about the fact that there are 3 ponds, one for men, one for either, and one for women. Therefore, nobody will be short of a pond. You know, there are alternatives. And I talked about the sexual violence statistics and the 2018 Times study, which showed that women are far more at risk in mixed changing rooms, because effectively the ladies' changing room there is now a mixed changing room. I think they were very, very worried because they couldn't face a discussion. And what followed, strangely, was an eruption in the WhatsApp group. One of the other new committee members launched a big personal attack on me, saying that I was only interested in my own issue and that I was a horrible person, I was aggressive, and that I took too much food at one of the breakfasts, which was getting a bit personal. It's quite possibly true. I didn't know there was a ration because I haven't been there very long. And I just put, this is all in writing, you know, obviously, clearly in writing. So I put in, I thought, we don't want to get into a war here. I'm not joining in this fight. I put in, this is an attack, hoping that somebody more senior would come in and intervene. And one did. The deputy chair intervened and she said, yes, Janice is disgraceful. I would like you all, because I said, I'm sorry if I've upset you, because she then revealed that something nasty of a sexual nature had happened to her, as it has to many of us. And it wasn't a trans person. I never said it was. And she was triggered. She was triggered by what I had written.
Oh, the fact that you had mentioned that there is sexual abuse, also that
that sexual violence happens. Yes, it's
just
largely
bringing
male
it
on
up.
female.
It's your
she
fault.
was triggered, and it was all my fault.
Yeah.
So this other woman joined in and she said, yes, and now Janice has given a fake apology. Because I said, I'm sorry, I've upset you. I was sorry I'd upset her. However, certain facts need to be dealt with. And this other woman joined in and said, I'd like you all to rate Janice's apology as a fake apology on a scale of 1 to 10. So
no,
talk about making it worse. Fortunately, some of the committee declined to join in because actually there were several on there who agreed with me. It later turned out. So yeah, it all went horribly wrong. They'd been trained by the City of London via the gendered intelligence training. So they were all convinced they'd had the right training and it was free, so it must be good. So I said, okay, I will organise some alternative training. So I got along some mates from the Women's Rights Network who do some training, and I actually paid £1,000 of my own money for them to come, because obviously to cover their travel expenses and so on. Couldn't expect them to do it for nothing. And held a little session in a community centre. They didn't want to have the session in a room over a pub. That was not nice enough for them. So we went to the nice community centre, and the trouble was the situation legally then was not clear cut, and you had to look at the principles behind it and some of the examples. And this woman, the deputy chair, said, well, if it's not clear cut, then I'm not going to listen, and sort of closed it all down early. So a lot of them were interested and came and talked to the trainers, and several other people left the committee with me later thinking, hang on a minute, this is not okay.
Yeah.
So
and then what went wrong? You said that you got banned or something in the end.
I put in some complaints, because all this was in writing. I put in 4 or 5 complaints about the way I've been treated. And the AGM by then was coming up, and I submitted a motion to the AGM saying I thought the pond should revert to being single sex. And also the other thing they'd done is they'd ignored the constitution, which said they're supposed to reach out to local disadvantaged women. They hadn't been doing that because they've been so busy congratulating themselves on having, trans people there and disabled people there. So I got together with the local gingerbread single parent group, and they were quite keen. I said, can we do a pilot where for one summer we let the single parent members of gingerbread in for free? Obviously in accordance with all the same regulations would apply.
Yeah.
And so I got obviously people to co-sign these with me. I put that forward, and off we went. In the run up to the AGM, they were obviously quite worried about this. And they were, in fact, they changed the venue. And I think they actually accepted lots of people at the last minute to be in there and support their motion, because they brought in a lot of people who hadn't been seen before, and my motion went down, which is fine. You have to try these things. They actually closed down the meeting early because Venice Allen, who's another, she had organised demonstrations and meetings at the pond, and she wanted to speak. They wouldn't let anybody speak for our motion. They told me I wasn't going to be able to speak, and then suddenly they said I was going to speak, so I spoke up. That's fine by me. And they closed them. They took the disruption that occurred as an excuse to close down the meeting in early. So we never really got to vote on these things properly. And that was the end of that.
Well,
so I got voted off the management committee, which was a relief.
How did they vote you off? Is that
they put in other people?
Yes.
They have these various regulations about things you're supposed to do. Of course, I'd done all of them. One of the regulations is that I think you're not supposed to miss more than 2 consecutive meetings.
Yeah.
They re-voted on one woman who hadn't been to a single meeting all year, and who was supposed to run the Twitter account, and there'd been no action on the Twitter account. So somebody that hadn't done either of her jobs was voted back on because she agreed with them. So there we go. I was quite happy to be voted off because I'd done what I was there to do. And I tried. It got quite a lot of press coverage and so on, quite a lot of attention. Yeah. And I think sometimes that's the reason for doing these things. If you don't engage with people, nobody notices that the women's rights have been taken away. So I complained about some of these things because it was, as I said, it's all in writing. And they then asked me, although I was no longer on the management committee, if I'd like to have my complaints investigated. And I said yes, thinking that they would invite another person from a voluntary organisation to look at all the written stuff and give a view. They went and hired a lawyer, a hotshot lawyer. They'd spent thousands of pounds on their failed disability case against the City of London, saying that charges were unfair to disabled people. And they went and hired a similar hotshot lawyer to investigate my complaints. And then they told me that there had been a number of complaints about me, none of which I've ever seen, none of which I know the content of, none of which I've ever been told the content of. And I had a session with the lawyer. I said, well, the documents speak for themselves. You can see it all in the WhatsApp group and so on. I said, and I said, what are the complaints against me? And she wouldn't tell me. So in the end, they did a report. And they said, send in a confidentiality agreement if you want to see the report. So I sent it in by return. And they said, no, we need a hard copy. I sent it down the wires. We need a hard copy. So I said, OK, what's the postal address to send it to? And they said, we haven't got a postal address. It's ludicrous. So I said,
So you
okay,
had to take
and
it there.
I sent it to the lawyer. Thought that's
Yeah.
a piece, pass
Yeah.
it on. I wasn't going to
Yeah.
get diverted like that.
Yeah.
And then they said, okay, come and see it then, but you'll have to come to the steward's office at the pond physically
Yeah.
and sit down there and look at it. And it was in my busiest month. I still work. I work in the travel industry, and it was in September, and I had about 4
Yeah.
different trips to different countries booked then, and I couldn't go then. So I said, sorry, I won't make it before the end of October, but I'll be much freer afterwards to come in. And then they said, oh no, if you can't make it by the end of September, then you can't come and see it.
Wow.
So there's this massive lawyer's report that cost thousands and thousands of pounds, all about me. And I don't know what the complaints against me were. I've had no chance to defend myself, and I've never seen it.
Wow. I wonder if you could do a freedom of information
And
request.
I've done that. They didn't get
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I did have some help from the Free Speech Organisation.
Yeah.
And they said they don't get much joy out of the Information Commissioner. I might go back to them. I
Yeah.
did do
Yeah.
that, but they still didn't include the report. They
Well,
just sent all the stuff I already had.